What is going on, everybody, and welcome back to the latest and greatest episode of Building the Board. So excited to dig into this one as myself, Robert Schmitz, and Nick. Oh gosh, we just did this, Nick.
It's all
Last
right.
name, you got me on the Italian piece, but now I'm
Okay.
confused on the
Just
pronunciation
say Nick
again.
the Italian. DeMeo.
Nick the
That's
Italian,
right.
but it is Nick what?
DeMeo.
DeMao, Nick
Sure.
DeMao, here powered by On Tap Sports, as we get to talk about the best position in football, and that is the position of safety. Now, look, Nick, I don't know about you. I could launch into a thesis about this, but what I think makes safety most interesting to talk about is that I don't think that there is a position that is defined worse in football than the position of safety right now. You look at all kinds of different defenses, and if you're playing a primarily quarters defense, if you're playing primarily a man-free defense, if you're playing primarily cover three, but you play a little bit of cover two, if you play a whole bunch of cover zero, oh my gosh, there are so many different ways to use a player and classify them as safety. It's like the defensive equivalent of athlete in some of
Yes.
these cases, or just labeling somebody DB. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, like the old Cordell Stewart. We'll just call him Slash. We'll
Right?
just
Exactly.
when nowadays how complicated defenses get, you just need a slash player because yeah, it is, and you don't want to put these guys in a box. You just want to kind of, see what kind of defenses they fit and see, for the Bears, is this a guy that will fit with the Bears? Because as we
Right.
know, the Bears have a giant opening at free safety with Eddie Jackson moving on, and I think this class is pretty deep, and I think it's pretty talented. It's one of the
Mhm.
classes, safety kind of goes by the wayside for NFL, NFL draft fans. You really haven't had too many highly drafted safeties. Off the top of my head, you've got Jamal Adams a few years ago, but typically safety is one of those positions that sort of falls down. You talk about guys maybe in the round of, end of the first round, second round. And I think this class has a lot of talent, and you're not seeing all that talent at the top end of the draft. You're seeing it kind of in the top of the second round, middle of
Mhm.
the second. And I think there's a lot of talent deep into this draft. So I'm excited to talk about not just potential Eddie Jackson replacements, but just the safeties in general.
And it's so funny to me to talk about this, Nick, because in the same vein as you mentioned that there haven't been all these highly rated safeties. I mean, look, I get it. I'm just a guy on the internet. Who am I to say what I am about to say? But I'm going to say it anyways. And that's that the NFL, kind of like what they do with tight end, doesn't seem like they quite know what they're looking for in many cases when they're scouting safeties. The traits that create a productive and really good safety player end up by the wayside. And then all of a sudden, I can't remember quite where he was drafted, but Tyler Hufunga comes out of absolutely
Yeah.
nowhere. And then the year or two after he's drafted, the San Francisco 49ers pull Jair Brown out of Penn State, Jaquan Brisker's running mate, out of the compensatory third. And
Right.
when Hufunga goes down, they replace him with a safety who's nearly as good when it comes
Right.
to coverage safety. Like, there are so many safeties that want to find the Jaquan Brisker types, the all-in-one safety, and there
Hmm.
just aren't many of them. You can
Right.
find plenty of Landon Collinses, guys that are very good at this one thing, and
Right.
hopefully you don't put them in position to do
Yes.
anything else. But there's really not a lot of jack of all tradeses, and when you do find the jack of all trades, they might actually be a master of none. So
Yeah.
it's an interesting position to talk about. You kind of hinted at this, but it gets even more interesting when you look at the Bears because I'm going to just come right out and say it, Nick. The Bears have one safety right now that's actually worth discussing. Do
Right.
you have an argument against that? Would you
I
like
don't
to
think
defend?
so.
This is your
I
moment to defend Elijah Hicks if
I was
you'd
just
like
gonna
to.
say, I'm glad we're talking about Elijah Hicks and finally giving him his flowers, and now we can. No, like I agree. I think Brisker is the only one, and he's oft injured, so it'll be interesting. We touched on it in the quarterback episode, but it'll be interesting with some of these safeties. Are they looking for a true center fielder to play in that cover three? Are they looking for someone more for a cover two role? Or are they going to look for someone that can do both? I think ideally they probably want someone like Eddie Jackson that can play both cover two and cover three in Matt Eberflus's system. So how many of those are in this draft? And where are the Bears going to be willing to draft that player? Is it going to be 75? Or are they going to have to trade something in the second round to get back up to get a guy like maybe, I'm not going to spoil it, but some of the players we're going to talk about here soon. So they
Right.
have a lot to talk about. I don't know, the free agency class, no one really jumps off the page. So I think knowing how Ryan Poles likes to address some of his more pressing needs, I think they'll be looking towards the draft. So it'll be it's big shoes to fill because Eddie Jackson had he was the general of that defense. He knew was great at getting the guys in position. So they're going to have a tall task at replacing him.
I agree, especially because it sure felt to me like the Bears pawned a lot of their coverage responsibilities off onto Eddie Jackson
Mhm.
so that they could take them off of Jaquan Brisker's
Yes.
plate. The further you put Brisker away from the line of scrimmage, the worse he tends to
Yes.
get.
Right.
And as much as I love what Jaquan Brisker can bring you in the run game, there's a reason that whenever the Bears drop into cover three, Brisker is unilaterally playing the flat because
Yes.
it's a relatively easy coverage responsibility. And it means that you need that center field safety to know what they're doing, or else you're going to
Mhm.
give up major chunks up the seams, up the alley, all the way up or over the top. It could be a real problem. But I tend to think that the Bears will find some kind of free agent. You've heard a lot of names, I'm sure, whether it's
Right.
Antoine Winfield or Geno Stone. It would not surprise me if the Bears are looking in a different direction.
Right.
Just that they might look for somebody even cheaper than those options, but nothing would surprise me. Though I do think the Bears are absolutely. I personally believe, Nick, this conversation we're about to have is one of the more important that you'll see on building the board. This one and like wide receiver,
Mhm.
because I think the Bears fully intend to draft a player that can start for them.
Yes.
Because to not have a third safety is to beg your reserve, whoever's sitting in third on the depth chart is
Right.
just going to play. Like it's a
Yes.
matter of time before
Yeah.
that player will play one way or another. And I won't be shocked if the Bears do, because remember, Terrell Smith was playing safety back in training camp last year. So
Mhm.
the Bears may explore other options to at least have some extra flexibility
Right.
outside of the draft. But I've had 75 earmarked for a safety all off season. And based on the scouting that we've done, I am not going to change that
Right.
one.
Right.
That's a very good
Yeah.
player.
Well, shall
Perfect.
we shall we jump
I
on in, I guess?
I think we should dive in.
All right,
And
cool.
I tried to sort this in order of popularity, maybe
Okay.
not how good they are.
Okay.
But
Gotcha.
let's dig into this. We're going to start off with number 27 out of Minnesota, Tyler Newman. And when we talked earlier about jack of all trades, personally, Nick, I believe this guy is the perfect example of that. He
Yes.
doesn't have the range that I think you'd want out of a true cover 3, what is it? A true cover 3 center field safety,
Right.
but he's kind of got everything else. Like
Yeah.
he's got size, he's 6'2 if memory serves. He's got solid speed. He's got weight listed at 210. He reads plays really, really well. I
Yeah.
mean, when we're talking about safety, I think one of the most important things that you can do is interpret information. It's always been ironic to me that the middle linebacker is called the quarterback of the defense. I think it's your deepest safety
Mhm.
because frankly, it's any safety, but especially whether you're playing that cover one rat role where you sit over the middle of the field or whether you're playing deeper, you have to be the first person on the defense to know that a threat is headed your way. And if not, you're going to give up a gain in the NFL. And Newman is really good at tracking what would be coming his way and snuffing out receivers. Now, I do have questions, to be honest with you, Nick, about how much he likes contact. And when it comes to his play in the run game, you'd be shocked, at least from what I've seen, at how commonly that guy it's as if he's hitting the blocker that is coming out to meet him while leaning backwards. I
Right.
really struggle to explain it other than he does not seem to enjoy hitting anybody. And as deep as he often plays, because especially cover 2 in particular, and man coverage. He's very good in man coverage. I think Newman can handle nearly anything you throw at him, and his flexibility will push him up a lot of different draft boards. But there are definitely pieces to his game that I think I don't even know if you can necessarily improve on all of them. Because if you don't like to hit, why would you like it more when the guys coming at you are bigger and faster? But I don't know. You tell me, am I off my rocker or have you seen similar things?
No, I saw similar things. I thought overall, for a safety, you would like to see him take better angles towards tackling. And yeah, I mean, I wouldn't call it a reluctance to hit, but yeah, it was a weird springiness to his hitting that it was like there was a bouncing off of would be tackles. And in the Michigan game, for his flaws as a tackler, you could see Michigan was doing everything it could to not throw his way in that Michigan game. I
Yes.
mean, they were uh, purposefully. I mean, it was boring tape to watch for Tyler Nubin because they did. I mean, they ran up the score. I think they scored over 50 points in that game, and they barely sniffed Tyler Nubin because they just knew that was the guy, and he was still directing directing the players around him, getting frustrated because guys were missing assignments. But yeah, he's a good cover corner. I would love to see. I don't know if the Bears will be in position to draft him. A lot of people have him as their first safety off the board. As good coverage, kind of an off tack, not the greatest tackler. Sounds like someone that might have just left Chicago. So maybe but I don't know if he's the same rangy player that Eddie Jackson was. I would certainly not lose any sleep if the Bears drafted him. I see him a lot mocked a lot in the second round, and I don't know if the Bears are going to have the capital to draft him. So as a certain jack of all trades, I would love him in Chicago because I think he would fill quite a void on the defense. And I think he's the type of rookie that could step in and be the general of that defense. I think his football IQ is high enough that even as a rookie, he could come in and direct traffic, but I just don't know if the Bears will be able to draft him.
Part of me really does wonder whether he's going to get drafted as high as he's projected. And I'm just begging the question, right? Because safety in particular is a position where I think, just like I mentioned about draft, or just like how I mentioned this about scouts and teams, I also think draft evaluators have no idea who wants who where, right?
Right.
And so Nubin's a player that I tend to think right now he is where he is on the board because he's 6'2", 210. And everybody
Mhm.
goes, well, dang, right?
Yeah.
That's prototype. But especially I'm going to truly avoid saying the word, though I think or you're going to be able to pick up on the S word that I'm implying. NFL teams do not like players that don't like hitting.
Oh,
So
yes.
if for any reason there's a team out there that thinks that that's a major problem, you may see a Trent Simpson-esque slide, though Trent
Mhm.
was obviously a linebacker. A player that I actually think is underdrafted at this point. And if he falls, oh my gosh, I'll love it, right?
Yes.
But it's USC's Kalen Bullock, who
Yes.
is he's famous at this point because he is as good as he is. You
Mhm.
want that rangy free safety? This is your guy.
Yeah.
He is 20. I believe he will be 21 at the time of the draft. He's a former 4-star high school recruit. He's 6'3", 190, played on a horrendous USC defense. And honestly, his ability to create space and gain ground in coverage is remarkable, in my opinion. Like, there are not that many safeties that are this fast. This guy is fast,
Yes.
fast. It's fast to the point where his angles are awful. Like, he is consistently overrunning the runner and
Right.
allowing guys to cut back inside. But just like I would have said about Eddie Jackson, so long as you can create, or so long as you force him back inside and somebody else is able to rally to
Mhm.
make the tackle, you did your job. We'd love it if you made the play because that could become a TFL. But I mean, some of the plays he makes in coverage, some of the throws he's able to deny, some of the plays or some of the moments where you see him recover and knock a ball away that had no business being incomplete, they really speak to me. And when
Yeah.
I think of center field safety, this is pretty much what I think of. What about you?
I agree. I definitely wonder how much the perception of him has dropped just because USC's defense has gotten dragged through the mud and rightfully so this entire year. But I mean, he was thought of before the year as maybe the best safety prospect heading into the year. And then, now he's dropped. He's still a top 4, top 3 prospect. But yeah, I mean, and what surprised me too watching tape was for a guy of his frame, which is pretty wiry, he's a tall, lean guy. He's not afraid to hit. I wouldn't call him the best tackler, but he's not afraid to come up and blow up a screen pass or blow up a run behind the line of scrimmage. I'm not going to call him he's not like a linebacker back there, but he is a guy that he's not going to shy away from contact. Yeah, I thought he was one of the true rangy center field prospects in the draft. He's a guy that truly can go sideline to sideline. He can make up a
Oh,
lot
yeah.
of ground. I enjoyed watching his film. Again, if he was there at 75, I'd have a hard time seeing the Bears pass him up unless someone else of equal, value slipped to them where they just really had a tough decision to make. But I think he would fill a major hole in their secondary.
I will be shocked if he's there at 75, and I don't do this often, but if he is there at 75 and there isn't some like jail concern or something like
Yeah,
that,
yeah,
he's the pick.
yeah.
Like this is exactly the kind of guy. I won't be shocked if he's first safety drafted. Like,
Yeah.
again, we focus so much on height, weight, speed, which allows us to transition into Jaden Hicks, and let's just balance the two off of each other,
Right.
right? Where to me, when I look at somebody like Kalen Bullock, I see a player where I can slot him in at an NFL free safety, whether that's he could play double high or two high, he could play quarters, he could play single high, and I know where he's going to be and how I'm going to use him. As a defensive coordinator, this is easy. And beyond that, another thing that I know I'm a big fan of, Nick, is when I can see a safety play corner and do so at a decent level.
Right.
Safeties just don't have the body type to play really strong corner, but when you
Mhm.
can line them up in man scenarios where they have to basically mimic a slot corner and they can hang tough, especially in the red zone, God, that
Yes.
rules. And then you look at a guy like Jaden Hicks and you out of Washington State, the body type couldn't be more different. The
Right.
role couldn't be more different. We're talking about a guy, when I talk about Jaden Hicks, who is, let me pull this up because his height weight is absolutely ridiculous, comparatively speaking. He
Yeah.
is
He's like a linebacker.
Oh, I mean, he does look like a linebacker, and he runs like a linebacker.
Yeah.
He is 6'3", 212. So he is a huge person. And
Mhm.
unlike Tyler Nubin, I think his speed really suffers for it. I
Yeah.
mean, he definitely knows where he's going most or the overwhelming majority of the time. The problem is, I mean, I have it written in my notes, man. He sometimes he looks like he's jogging. He
Yeah.
can be so slow when it comes to how he moves and the way that he gets to the play. He's played in a complex defense that has a whole bunch of rotation stuff that's
Mhm.
gone on there, which I think is a good thing for as far as projecting him forward. He'd have to be a box safety, which doesn't work for the Bears. But
Right.
beyond that, I just don't know if he's fast enough. Reminds me a lot of JL Skinner out of Boise State last year.
Yeah, he is a thumper, or he'd have to be a thumper in the NFL because it was rough watching him try to keep up with wide receiver, because Washington State would align him against, we had previously mentioned lining him up against a receiver in the slot, and they did that a few times. And I mean, just watching a receiver run a slant on him, you could tell he has the football IQ to know it's coming. He just doesn't have the fluidity or the speed to catch up to it. So um I think he's a smart player. I think he knows where the ball's going. I just don't think he has the speed to get to where it is. So you see a lot of barely missed tackles that in the NFL are going to be wildly missed tackles if he's trying to cover someone. Um, yeah, it was kind of shocking to see how on tape he just looked kind of clunky would be the word I would describe it. Just not a free safety, not a free safety by any stretch of the imagination, a true box safety, which has its place in the NFL, but like you said, is not a need for the Bears right now.
And I mean, I gotta beg the question, right? Where are we focusing on what Jaden Hicks can do and doing that same thing
Right.
that we heard a prominent football person get memed for on Twitter the other day, where you're only scouting his good plays, right?
Right,
Because
right.
to me, the scariest part about Jaden Hicks is that a lot of his bad plays are plays where he's simply not there at all. And I mean
Yeah.
that in the most literal sense. It's not that he was chasing it and he didn't get the edge. It's that he could have or should have been there and wasn't. Not
Right.
because of a mental or lapse, but because they threw misdirection. He took one step in the wrong
Yeah.
direction, and then the play went the other way. And to me, the scariest part about the NFL, Nick, especially at DB, this applies at corner, but it gets really nasty at safety. Because
Mhm.
last episode we talked about outside corner, outside corner. At
Right.
safety, you deal a lot with the wide receiver three. Who's the wide receiver three? Who's the wide receiver four, Nick? It's usually the fastest
Right,
guy on the
right.
team. Like it's the guy like Tyler Scott
Yeah, yeah, I
from
was
the
just gonna say.
NFL's perspective, where it's like, has this guy done anything? Not really. Does he have crazy good wide receiver abilities? Not really. But Ray McLeod, if you don't have the foot speed, will gas you. And
Right.
then he'll light you up for a 50-yard touchdown that will flip an NFL game on its head that's only got 5 total scores in it.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
it's a brutal game in the NFL, but it's one that I think you have to be a certain element of fast to
Right.
play, which a name, if you do like Jaden Hicks, that I personally think you should get familiar with is a guy who was at the Senior Bowl. He plays for Oregon State. His name is Keaton Oladipo. And when I watch him, Nick, his natural athleticism oozes out. I
Yes.
love the fact that instead of being a reactive player, which I think is something Jaden Hicks struggles with, this guy is an attacker. I don't know whether it's always hard with a safety to tell whether he's recognizing or whether he's pitch guessing. But when I watch Oladapo, and
Mm,
granted, I don't have a great familiarity with his injury history, but the only real flaw I see is that he's a redshirt senior. So he's about 23 years old.
yeah.
Definitely more polish, but he's also listed at 6'3", 216, and he moves like that. Like,
Yeah.
I don't really get why PFF currently has this guy listed at number 260. Maybe I'll learn a thing or two, but it feels like his age is holding him back. His play on tape looks pretty good.
Yeah, I thought the same thing. I was really shocked. I mean, he was a palate cleanser after watching how slow
Did you go straight from one to the
yeah,
other?
I went from Hicks to Oladapo, and it was quite a difference. And part of me had to like take a break because I was like, wait, am I looking at this with fair eyes, or am I just kind of like, am I trained to watch Hicks and now I'm going to Oladapo? And I took a break and I went back and I was like, oh, he still looks good. Yeah, I mean, he's a guy that crashes the line of scrimmage and he's a sure tackler. I really, he comes up, he wraps up. I watched him. I watched Oregon State versus Oregon, and that turned into a barn burner for Oregon. And he was still making touchdown saving tackles. One of my favorite plays was Oregon is running for a touchdown towards the end of the game. I think they're up by 3 or 4 scores, and Oladapo chases a guy down, tackles him, but like the 6 or 7 yard line, they force a field goal. And I guarantee you, whoever's scouting for the Bears is giving that tape to Ryan Poles, not Ryan Pace, and saying, this is a guy that you want on the team. This is a guy that is not going to get any loafs or whatever whatever they give defensive players. I mean, that's the type of stuff that some front offices really value because it's really easy when your team is, Alabama and you're winning every game, or Georgia, to look great. But it's when you're on a team like Oregon State and you're losing by 4 scores on a game that, is half filled in the stands, and you're down by 4 scores, but you're still chasing a guy down, and then you force a field goal. I think that's a really high character mark for the team that might be drafting you. And I think Eddie Jackson was an old prospect. I think he was 23 or 24, and the Bears got 6 solid years out of him. So, if they can get the same out of him and get him in a later round, I think that's a great return on their investment if he can come in. And the only flaw I saw in his game really was he can look a little clunky on his transitions and coverage, coming from out of his back pedal into, trying to break. But I mean, he moves well for a 6'3" safety. You're talking,
Oh, yeah.
that's nitpicking. So
I got the impression that he can break from anywhere, but he tries to
yes.
do too much.
Yeah.
Almost like I don't know his story. I would have to. I mean, to be honest with you, Nick, it's going to take the Bears drafting somebody for me to watch any tape of
Right.
his
Right.
2023, unless we're talking quarterbacks. So if the Bears drafted Oladapo, yeah, I'm going to go take a look at the rest of his Oregon State tape, what kept him off the field, et cetera, et cetera. But he's somebody I found really interesting because I thought he just kept trying to do too much,
Mhm.
which doesn't always bother me. I mean, especially when it's working more often than it's not.
Right.
That Oregon State defense needed a chaos
Yeah.
stirrer
Yeah.
because when they played static, Oregon just pieced them up. But
Yes.
we talked about this in the corner episode. He's one of these guys that I think I have to bring this up. There are some players that they love what the game does for them, and there are
Yes.
some players that love the game. And Oladapo looked to me like he treasured every snap that he
Yes.
got the chance to play. And I think that's a really cool thing when we're
Yeah.
talking about a player that do I think Oladapo could contribute on special teams? Yes, I do.
Yes.
Do I think that Oladapo could transition from it's not quite a Saban star role, but you
Mhm.
probably saw the same thing I do. Oladapo played box. He
Yeah.
just looks like he has the athleticism to play cover 2, cover
Mhm.
4, and then I have no idea about cover 1. But
Right.
maybe you draft him and you figure it out.
Yeah.
But he's a player that I really enjoyed watching, and
Yeah.
somebody that in the classic safety fashion doesn't have a name brand, but just because we don't know his name doesn't mean he won't be quite good.
Right.
Had himself an underrated Senior Bowl too. Nobody talked about the fact that he was the only National League safety that seemed to be able to deflect anything. Or
Yeah.
wait, by National League I intended no National. I had it right. I looked at the rosters wrong. Most of the safeties in the National League were not amazing
Not
national
good.
roster, but Oladapo looked every bit as athletic as he did on tape. And
Yeah, he looked
when I'm
great
down
on
at the Senior Bowl, that's what I want to see. Perfect. Moving on, let's talk about one of the other most popular players that keep showing up in Bears mock drafts,
tape.
and that is Georgia's Javon Bullard. And if you'd like to, we can talk about Javon and Tyke, his running mate, in concert,
In tandem, sure.
but you don't have to because that would confuse Quentin, our wonderful producer. So let's start with Bullard. What did you see when you watched this tape?
I mean, I liked Bullard. I guess I think he's a good. I, I liked Bullard overall. I definitely saw the slot corner in him, and they moved him to safety. I do have questions about his overall viability as a free safety in the Bears defense. I certainly think he might be a product more of fans scouting the helmet than the player. I think there's a lot of rawness in his game. I definitely. uh, I don't want to say that I don't think he's a player that the Bears wouldn't draft. I just think there would be better options at 75 than Bullard. I mean, I would take Oladapo over him. I would take Bullock over him. I don't think Bullock's going to be there, but I certainly think Bullard, he might be more destined for a slot corner role in the NFL. He's very raw as a safety, and that shows up on tape. I think he's a guy that might be getting slightly guessing at times, getting away with it with his athleticism and not quite the polished product. You know, you saw this with a lot of a lot of Bears fans when they were mocking the center out of Georgia. I think it was Cedric Van Pran. They, you know, I think you see a guy from a distinguished program and you think maybe that person is going to be an immediate impact starter, and then you go and watch the tape and you might think, oh well, actually this guy might not be the greatest fit. You know, I think his running mate Tyke Smith might be a better option for the Bears than Bullard, but I'd be curious what you think about that.
So I'm really confused when I think about Javon Bullard because if I'm grading him just off of his 2023 tape, I do not think he's a great anticipator. I don't think he tracks runners naturally. I don't think he's consistently clean out of his breaks. I think he drops too deep in half field safety looks. But then you point this out, and this shows just how much time and effort I really have to put in because I can tell you what I saw on the tape, and it had not occurred to me that he hasn't been a safety for very long. And
Right.
all of these things are the mark of a 21-year-old playing a different position.
Right.
And
Right.
outside of that, he's been a 4-year starter, even as a true freshman at Georgia. And I'm not about to try to reverse this on you because that still would worry me, right? But if he's been a safety for 4 years and he still hasn't picked up these anticipatory traits, that's one thing. But if he's brand new to the position, well, then
Right.
I guess it makes sense that he doesn't have a lot of this smoothed out. I do think he's a twitchy athlete. I do think he handles receiver relationships with space pretty well. And moreover, there's a 10 to 15% chance on Bullard's film that he is going to look like he has read the playbook, he has lived that play before,
Mhm.
and he jumps it with a fearless abandon that is really attractive to watch. It's just the question of whether or not you're going to get that Javon Bullard and only that Javon Bullard, or are you going to smooth him out and polish him? Because Tyke Smith looks polished as heck. And
Right.
especially when you compare the fact that Javon Bullard looks a little bit. I mean, I would tell you that you can see the weight difference between Tyke Smith and Javon Bullard in terms of the way they play the run game, but you would not expect, in my honest opinion, what is it, 10 pounds? I'm looking at my sheet right now, looking for the answer on just how much Tyke Smith actually weighs.
He's
Yeah, okay, so it is 10 pounds.
yeah.
You wouldn't expect 10 pounds to be the difference between somebody who gets blocked pretty easily and somebody who is extremely hard to block in the
Right.
run game. And that kind of motor would probably mean something to the Bears. But when I look at Smith, he plays that star role, right? So
Mhm.
you see a whole lot more catch man. You see nearly no dropbacks deep. So we just don't really know how he would
Right.
play in the deep space of the field. But he's a force player in the run game. I know I said that earlier, but that really matters because when you do have a DB and a safety that can give you back a number in the run game when you were already expecting to lose one, that can be a real plus towards getting closer to 3rd and 8 as opposed to 3rd and 4, right?
Right.
He's twitchy enough. I don't think he's as twitchy as Bullard, but he looks much more complete safety than he does his running mate. It's just a question of whether with his running mate, you're looking at projection or production. You know what I'm saying?
Exactly. And that's kind of where I guess my take, I don't know, from a macro level of the NFL, I think if I was drafting one overall, I think if I was a team that had to take another person in place like an Eddie Jackson to take a chance on Bullard that could bring Eddie Jackson, or Eddie Jackson could bring him along, I would take Bullard over Smith. I just don't know if Brisker, I don't know who the Bears have in their secondary that could, it would have to be John Hoke, the secondary coach, that would have to kind of tutor Bullard. And I don't know if he would be an immediate plug and play starter at free safety, or if you're still looking for a guy, I guess if they addressed it in free agency, if they got a guy on a cheap 1-year deal, maybe a prove it deal, Xavier McKinney comes over from the Giants for a couple of years or so, and they can get a guy like Bullard to come in and be their third safety that they can, develop. I could see it. Bullard would be a guy that, with how raw he looks on tape at times, it would be a questionable decision to kind of leave the backfield. I don't know who they would rely on. If it would be, do they have the confidence in Brisker? Because I feel like even Brisker's admitted that backfield was Eddie Jackson's to command. So is he ready to pick up that mantle and run it himself, or do they need someone else back there to do it for him? So that would be my only hesitation. Rob, I think you might be on mute. I know you're
How
curing
long have I
cancer
been
right
on
now.
mute?
Oh, dang. I know you just cured cancer and no one heard it.
No worries. Okay, so then let me reset. Q, you're gonna have to edit this out. Thank you. But
Sorry.
so that was and it's interesting that we talk about this because as we talk about Bullard and the athleticism that he shows, and you compare him to somebody like Cameron Kinchins out of Miami, who we're
Yeah,
going to segue our way into, you start to ask yourself, okay, where are these guys going to get drafted and what is going to drive their draft spot? Because
right.
with Bullard, who's to say you can't get the better center fielder, but you don't know, and the floor for what you're going to get within your first couple of years is a little less settled than somebody like Kinchins, where you're going to take a look at his tape and you're going to say, okay, what are we going to do with him in the NFL? Well, we're going to take him from that uniform and we're going
Yeah,
to put him in our uniform and we're going to play him the exact same way. The
right.
only thing that I see in Kinchins' game that he doesn't have that some of these other guys have is crazy burst. But that can't be shocking because at 6'0", 205, Cam Kinchins is a quite big person. He's a
Yeah.
dynamic athlete for his size. I think he looks way bigger than just 6 foot in Miami's pads. But at least his anticipation is a little inconsistent. Playing eyes to the quarterback can make him a little late at times. He's a very strong block hitter and uses his natural length really well. But at least as far as what I see with him at the next level, I think he'll be a valuable player. I can't tell if he is going to be the center fielder after all that Miami played him at.
Right.
But I wouldn't be surprised if the Bears put him there anyways. That's where he spent time at safety, or that's where he spent time at the Senior Bowl. So we'll see.
Yeah, I'd be curious about Kinchins if he put on weight between his sophomore and junior season, because he was still a ball hawk in 2023, but it looked like he maybe got a step slower from his 2022 to 2023, because I did notice his sideline range seemed to take a step backwards. And I don't know if that's just maybe Miami asked him to bulk up a little bit to fill out that role of being the hard hitting safety as well as the free range, the free range safety. Not he's not a chicken, but I don't know why I say free range, but center
It's
field
easy.
safety.
It's right there.
But yeah, I noticed him a step slower. he got a neck injury against Texas A&M earlier this year that kind of knocked him out for a couple of games. Pretty scary neck injury, but it only knocked him out for a few games. Yeah, I like Kinchins a lot. He's very versatile. They played him in the slot. They played him cover one. They
All
played,
over.
yeah, everywhere. He was a guy I really liked. I've seen him, at 75. If the Bears could get him, it would be very enticing. How did he look at the Senior Bowl? I don't know if did you get a chance to see him at all at the
I thought he
Senior
looked
Bowl?
good. I did think that the projection that you're seeing for him right now is much more earnest because at
Okay,
the time, I mean, look, when we're scouting these guys, we all look up where they're roughly rated to go in the draft just to measure what our eyes are telling us. And I did not see a mid-second rounder, but a
okay,
guy who is in the high to mid third, yeah, okay, now we're talking
okay,
because
yeah,
there are definitely pieces of Kinchin's game that he's very good at. And you see a well-rounded player that can handle all the things that safety's going to throw at you. And what he can do in the run game for you is a surefire boon when it comes to
right,
that conversation. In terms of the min max, you're getting a little more run support and you're giving up a little bit of range and coverage. So I will have to go back and look now that we mention it on how far away or how far can this guy move, right?
right,
But that's a separate conversation that I think we would have with all kinds of these different
yeah,
safeties. And if you don't mind, we're good to move on to our next player
yes,
who I absolutely think fits in this conversation. This is Auburn's free safety in Jalen Simpson, who I don't even know if he's 180 pounds wet, but he's a
yeah,
former corner out of Auburn that they bumped to safety. And I think he's got all of the ball skills that you would look for in a free safety in a class like this. He's also playing ahead of the play. Remember, ahead of the play,
mm,
with in line with the play, behind the play. He's ahead of the play consistently. His game against Georgia in particular, he is quite good. He's one of the rare safeties that I think you see from a cover 3, cover 5 position that's willing to nail, that's what's called like to drive on dig routes and over routes over the middle. And when you can cut those off, I think you take away all kinds of free completions
yes,
for quarterbacks left and right. I love it when you see a safety arriving to hit an underneath curling defender or an underneath curling offensive player before the linebacker does. Like when the
yes.
safety beats him from depth to get there, you can tell that a guy's playing with anticipation. And I think Simpson sees it. His Senior Bowl was hilarious because most of the time he was taking L's because, like Eddie Jackson, he's not that special an athlete, except for the times when he was on it. And then he came up with nearly 2 separate interceptions that totally fit what I would have expected from his game. But he's a very specific player in that you aren't
Right.
getting him to play a box safety role. And I think he only does just enough in the run game to justify what he can give you in coverage. But are you seeing what I saw?
Yeah, I really like the tape. I mean, I watched the same UGA game, and I thought he might be one of a guy that plays faster than he tests when he runs
Oh,
because he
yeah.
looked like his play speed seemed very, very high. His play strength might need to be worked because, like you said, he's got a very, very thin frame. But yeah, I saw a guy that was flying all over the field, breaking up passes, bodying up Brock Bowers in the end zone, breaking up passes. It was a guy that I don't know where you have him ranked. I think you had mentioned maybe like the 5th round is someone like that or
I
4th or
can't
5th.
figure it out
Yeah, I,
because
I don't
I
know.
I tatted him with like a late second round grade,
Okay.
but that's me saying how much I like him, not
Yeah.
I think he'll get drafted, which I
Right.
try to separate. He
Right.
could easily be taken in that Jair Brown, like compensatory third-ish
Right.
range, which would mean he's there at 75.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
you always worry, I always worry that I'm about to take a DB that the NFL will hate and say, "You should take him in the 3rd,"
I
and look
know.
like
Yeah.
you know what I mean?
Right. Yeah, because like I liked everything. I mean, he was the best true, I thought, rangy
True
safety
free.
after
Mhm.
Kalen Bullock, and I think we both assume Bullock will be gone by the time they draft at 75. So I mean, if they're looking for that true Eddie Jackson replacement that you can throw up there and leave on an island in center field and just roam sideline to sideline, I think Simpson would be a fine consolation prize if they can't get Bullock. So I liked what I saw. I thought he was a lot more physical than his frame would lead you to believe. You see a guy that wiry and you think he's going to be a more passive defender, and he was throwing his body all around and,
Mhm.
dominant presence for Auburn. So that's got to be something that, the Bears will love. So he could come in and be a real, a real fix for the Bears if that's someone that they target early in the draft, or, at 75 in the draft, if he's still available.
He's the most number 4 like player that I've watched so far in this draft.
Yeah.
That doesn't always mean you're going to be that good. But
Right.
if you are looking for an Eddie Jackson replacement, this guy screams Eddie
Yeah.
Jackson replacement. And we might as well talk at this point about Utah's Sione Vaki, because I think the safety running back gets a whole lot of play. Man, I don't trust his feel when I watch
Yeah.
him. I mean, he looks like a player that to me doesn't specialize at safety. He's a fast enough mover and a quick enough breaker, but especially the game that I keep going back to is Sione Vaki's, so that's Utah playing Oregon. Oregon
Mhm.
had no issues walking around him because
Right.
he's just late enough to each individual play that it might as well have been as if he wasn't there a
Right.
few too many times. And that's at least what I saw. What do you see?
Yeah, he's one of these guys that I think he gets a lot of. Well, I don't want to discredit what he's done as a prospect, because I do think he's getting the attention he deserves. But I also think he's
Yes.
a really unique story in that, he went on a mission trip, so he missed a year at Utah. Then he kind of plays safety and he plays running back. So he's kind of this weird. He's kind of this unique story that I think people are latching on to, and they might be boosting his value based on the feel good nature of the story versus the actual prospect himself. Hasn't displayed a lot of ball skills. I don't think he had an interception at Utah. He's a prospect. I'm kind of like you. I'm a little more. I don't know where he fits in with the Bears. I don't even
No.
know if he'll be. There's questions if he'll even be a safety. I think he wants to be a safety, but he can be a running back. So, he could come in and be a dual threat player. But in the NFL, is he even going to be a safety? Is he going to be a guy that's going to play running back? He kind of is one of these. I don't want to say a tweener, because I don't know if that exists for a guy that plays running back and safety, but it's an interesting story. But yeah, I noticed the same deficiencies, and I don't know. I don't know if the Bears have him on their radar. I would be very surprised if they took him especially with the 75th pick. I don't think that they have someone like that. I don't know where he would fit on the Bears, to be honest.
I mean, probably in Brisker's spot, which
Yeah,
is part of the
yeah,
problem, right? Where at least with what Vaki's got going for him, he's got some pop as a hitter,
yeah,
but it's nothing wild.
right.
And beyond that, I mean, you compare him to guys like Tyke Smith or like, who's another like physical force? I guess it would be Jaden Hicks. Like
Mhm.
those
Yeah,
guys are much better prospects and they don't come with some of the other baggage. It's funny because when I'm watching Sione Vaki, I think people think they're watching Evan Williams out of Oregon,
mhm,
who is 6'1", 205 compared to 6'0", 207. But Evan, at the very least, he shows. Look, I love the fact that one of the games I watched when he was playing Washington, he played it with a club. I love the players that are willing to club up and get
right,
after it anyways. But he moves really well. He's tough as hell. He's got balance that lets him drive and recover. And most importantly, he is seeing the play as it happens rather than playing behind the play. And when the run lane opens up in the middle of the field, there's Evan Williams ready to take the running back to the
right,
ground. When he drops into center field safety looks or into too high coverage looks, split field safety looks, he is able to subtly move enough to continue to pressure the passer. And Michael Penix, if he can, he will. And so
right.
when Evan Williams was able to take away a couple of key throws over the middle, I'm looking at that, ready to tip my hat. And also, you saw Williams beat Roma Dunze a couple times for plays in the run game, which is not an easy thing to do. So that kind of player, I could see being an alternative way that the Bears might try to address that center field safety.
Right.
Because again, he's much heavier. Right. You'd
Yeah.
be looking for a player that's less focused on range and more. We have two safeties. They're both going to fit the run. We're going to live and die by what our corners do. But
Right.
I could see the Bears being interested because I can see Williams being jack of all tradesy enough to still be there in, say, the fourth round if the Bears didn't get the guy they wanted at
Mhm.
75. But I have no idea. That's going to be a
Yeah.
separate question.
It would be, I mean, I think with Williams compared to Vaki, I think that's a great example of instincts for one player versus, I don't think Baki's even played, I don't, he's a lot more, and you can just tell the inexperience on tape versus a player
Yes.
like Williams. Just the instincts jump off the tape for a player like Williams. You can tell he's got just much more command of the defense. He's got better short area quickness, better burst, better, even though they're about the same similar size. It's just he plays bigger because he just looks like he covers area better than Vaki does, and that's a difference between if one guy with Vaki, a guy that you had mentioned, if I had Bo Braid would be a guy that if I had the opportunity to draft, that is a guy who I think Vaki profiles similar to, but Bo Braid is a guy that just every time I watch him, that guy is flying around like a missile. And that would be someone I'd be much more interested in the Bears taking because he also has, I think, very good coverage skills that are a little underrated.
Yes. No question there. I heard you trail off. I was like,
No,
yes.
no,
Like, keep going. Bo
yeah,
Brady.
no,
I've got him as Bo Brady. Not that I know, but
okay,
Bo Brady is awesome. I mean,
yeah,
like PFF hated his Michigan game. I did not. I loved his Michigan
yeah,
game.
I watched it. Yeah,
He's got timing as a blitzer. He's got feel in coverage. He's willing to just be a hand grenade. I mean, the guy is just a massive ball of chaos when
yeah,
he's playing safety. And I think that works in his favor. I think he's a similar profile. Okay, Bears fan, do not take me too seriously when I say this, but the same way that you watched Jalen Petrie at Baylor
mhm,
in that
yeah,
star role a little while ago, or like a couple of years ago, and then they bumped him up into a true cover two Lovey
right,
role, and he does completely different things, but he's still the same playmaker. I think you could expect a similar transition with a guy like
yes,
Brady, who is a problem that these guys need to solve in the run game. He's
mhm,
got natural timing as a blitzer, but then in coverage, I think he tracks route combinations really well. And his biggest issue that I've seen is that he's a gambler. And so there'll
yeah,
definitely be times where he gets caught ball watching in
right,
zone
right,
and ends up getting picked apart. And for better or for worse, he definitely plays a lot lighter than 200. If you told me that he was 185 during the season, I would
mhm,
believe you because he just doesn't have more thump than his
right,
thin frame suggests that he will. But he reaches the run lane. He's fearless. He's instinctive. He's a fast breaker. That's another guy where I don't know if you should take him at 75, but I would consider it.
yeah. I mean, that was a guy that just his tenacity jumped off the tape, watching him fly around. And I think Eberflus can live with a gambler a little bit. I think with how much he preaches turnovers, I don't know if that's as big a knock as it would be on some other, maybe. I know people try to pigeonhole Eberflus as this conservative coach, and I think in some regards he is, but I think on defense, he probably preaches to those guys. Yeah, I mean, I know he preaches takeaways. It's part of his hits philosophy. It's one of the letters, but um, I think he can probably live with the periodic big play if the gambling is going to pay off, even 50-50. So I definitely think, for a guy like Braid that flies around the field, just creating chaos wherever he goes and wreaking havoc on an offense, that's something that, you know, that isn't really what Eddie Jackson did, but it's something the Bears, you know, I think they could benefit from, if they don't,
Oh,
if they
yeah.
can't, it might be a way they pivot if they can't find a true center fielder. Maybe we'll get a guy that, I mean, I don't think Brady is slow. I think, he's not a slow guy, but he's a different way of fixing the problem. He's a guy that, maybe he's not going to have the straight sideline to sideline speed, but he is going to be a guy that is just going to be a chess piece that's going to move around and just create problems for an offense all day.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. And the other funny piece to this is that we don't really have a great vision for what the Bears actually want in a center
Yeah.
field safety because it's easy for us to say, well, they want Eddie Jackson. Well, they had Eddie Jackson.
Yeah. Yeah.
And especially when I do not know this, but when I think Brisker ended up being a little bit less comfortable in deep areas of the field than maybe the Bears would have wanted him to be, you started to see this need for that other safety that's going to
Mhm.
complement Brisker. And they've mentioned this. They know that they want somebody that can complement Brisker. That's not something they're unaware of. The question is, do they want somebody who's a little more aggressive and willing to play at the line, like Oladipo, like Bo Brady? Because remember, Eddie Jackson plenty often would play up at the line and
Right.
they'd stick Brisker in the back and basically hope that nobody came at him. this
Right.
happens. And that fits these guys a lot more than it fits guys like Jalen Simpson, Caleb Bullock. But
Mhm.
Caleb Bullock, Jalen Simpson fit on all those other pretty cover 3
Right,
plays and
right.
plenty of those cover 2 plays where you're going to have him shade one way or another, or those 3-by-1 alignments, who's playing poach and who's playing like over the top of the problem area. Ideally, you want that guy to be a little bit more coverage skilled. And I
Mhm.
just can't help but think that while there are going to be some intriguing dime backer potential safeties like Malik Mustafa out of, gosh, is he Wake Forest? I
I
think
believe
he's
so,
Wake
yeah.
Forest. Like you'll get plenty of these other guys like Josh Proctor. Look, I can read you the list of all the guys at the
Mhm.
Senior Bowl and a couple other safeties if you'd like. But in the world of other Bears fits, man, I just can't shake it that I think that the Bears are looking for somebody who they are able to start next year and
Yes.
without much question. They're
Right.
not trying to find a dice roll. They've now taken 2 of them in Elijah Hicks and the other guy whose name completely escapes me. And I'm not going to look it up
I
because he's a
totally
7th
forget.
round pick and
Oh,
he
Williamson out of Stanford. I forget his first name,
Mhm.
but yeah, I remember. I
It
don't even know
is.
Kendall, right?
Kendall
Kendall
Williamson is
Williams?
exactly right. Great,
Yeah.
great
I
memory.
have no idea. I mean, that just I
The moment he didn't beat the guy that they had to claim off waivers, I was
yeah,
like, "Oh,
yeah,
that's not great."
yeah, yeah,
But I think that there's gonna be an element of the Bears are trying to finish this team. Like,
yeah,
for whatever way that means at the quarterback conversation that you and I are just not gonna get into. The Bears are trying to finish this thing. They're trying
yes,
to lock this team up and say, "Okay, we are done." And I
right,
think with a free agent on a relatively cheap deal and a rookie that you're able to have step in next year, you do that.
right.
If not this year, but that's how I see it. What about you?
I agree. I mean, and I don't know if we touched on Terrell Smith. We both kind of were spitballing about the idea of him maybe being a safety. Maybe they see him as a long-term safety. You know, we don't know really. I think he was drafted to sort of be that traditional cover 2 cornerback, and then as the defense sort of kind of evolved, maybe he fits more as that safety role. But I agree. I mean, I certainly think, I think you can get the best of both worlds. And in my opinion, I would think, not putting all your chips on, because there aren't a lot of we talked about, in my opinion, 2 really true free roaming safeties in Bullock and Simpson. I think if I'm the Bears and I'm polls and I'm hedging my bets, I'm going out and I'm buying, I'm not buying, I'm signing the best free agent, free safety that I can think of, or that I can, that I evaluate in free agency. And I'm going out and I'm getting one of these Bo Brady's, I'm getting one of these Keaton Oladapos that can come in and be a chaos mixer and just someone that, yeah, maybe I can develop them to be a free safety, but I know I can design specific packages where I can bring them in and they have just enough coverage skill that they're not a liability. It's gonna, I can disguise coverages around them. I can do whatever I want, and I can still pull in my safeties, have them, I could design packages around them. And, who knows, maybe in 2 years, these guys have developed into proper safeties, but at least I'm buying myself a few years to
Right.
see if they develop. And I'm not pigeonholing myself to where I'm having to rely solely on a rookie to be the leader of the defense. That would be kind of what I think maybe they're looking at doing if they are, because like we said, you can never have too many defensive backs. And I think maybe with the safety position, they're gonna target someone with a little bit more versatility than some of the players we discussed that I think really just fit in one sole role. So I mean, a guy like Bo Brady, uh, I mean, Cameron Kitchens, if he falls, I mean, that would be a great versatile player. They could, but I mean, Keaton, those would be guys, like I said, I think would really be high on their board if they're able. I mean, free agency is going to dictate so much of what I think their draft will be, obviously,
Yes.
but I would be shocked if they head into the draft without at least a stopgap at free safety. And then,
They need one.
yeah, they definitely need, and I think a veteran, like you said, someone that I think if your plan is to go in with a rookie, then using not using valuable draft capital and waiting till the 3rd or 4th round, that's a recipe for disaster, because you're putting an awful lot of faith in someone that may not be able to digest the defense in the few months between the draft and the, preseason. So I think a veteran with a diverse rookie that can come in and play several positions and kind of make an impact in year 1 and then just kind of see where it goes from there.
I think that's all you can do. I
Yeah.
really do. But until then, we got more reports to write.
Yeah.
And the safety position is so fun, but we got to get some tape together. By we, I mean me. I'm looking at me. I gotta put some of this stuff, but I can't wait to show you guys so that you can see everything that we've been talking about. Q, hit me in the chat on what the next episode to come is so that I can advertise it. But this has been awesome. Nick, what do you got coming out soon that people can find online?
I'm working on my Terrion Arnold article. I'm hoping to have that out tomorrow. I'll be wrapping up my cornerbacks probably early next week, and then I'll probably be hopping on safeties, helping you any way I can, just try to
Yes.
get everything ironed up before, see, after the combine, we're going to have lot more stuff ironed out that we can get in our reports. But yeah, we're
Oh,
keeping
yeah.
them chugging along. So it's fun. It's
I
been
mean,
fun.
sure seems like we'll have a lot of
Yeah.
things ironed out, if you know what
Yeah.
I'm saying, after the combine. But we'll
Absolutely.
see what happens. As far as me goes, expect a whole bunch of safety reports to hit on Tap Sportsnet, as many as I can create. We've got wide receivers and tight ends coming next week, which should be awesome. You
Yeah.
should see all kinds of Ben Sinnott propaganda pop up in the world of the tight end stuff that we do. And I can't wait to hear which wide receivers in particular the guys are liking, because it is a fun, fun class. Thank you guys so much for hanging out
Thank
with
you
us. And until
guys.
next
It's been a
time,
blast.
we'll see you later.